Good afternoon. Welcome to Coding with Zeller and my Introduction to Python series. Today we're looking at the programming problem of verifying the date format of an input string. Part 2, validating the data format. In Part 1, we gave an overview of the programming problem and determined which 4 aspects of the problem needed to be developed first. Okay, you can see that I've got it started here. We're going to write a function that's named isValidFormat. The D string is the date string that was received from the user. We're going to pass this as the only input to our function. Now let's start to design our code. Well, first, let's develop what the dash is. We can do this with a string literal, but let's actually define a variable or identifier representing the dash. Now, we need to begin first structural analysis on the string. This is a great example of short circuit evaluation. So if the length of the string is 10 and we have a dash in these 2 positions, which should be positions 2 and 5, then it looks like the string is going to have the appropriate character. All right, so then let's see what we want to do. We also want to write an else, so we need a body of the string here. We may need to process the string further. And by the way I'm writing this, you should always write both clauses of the if. And so here we have the if format. I recommend you at least get these 2 branches written structurally at this time. Then you can decide which one to write first. Well, without thinking about the problem more deeply, I think we could say false here. So let's come up with let's return false back to the user. So if it doesn't meet this initial criteria, we know that it's a bad date string. So we're going to return false to the statement, is it valid? Okay, what do we want to do in this block? Can we say we could really return a true to the main program? I think we would, if we think about it for a few moments, we would say no, we probably shouldn't, because just because it has 10 characters and the 2 dashes in the correct positions, it doesn't say that it only has 2 dashes. See, there could be another dash in there. It can't have less than 2 dashes, right, because of these 2 criteria. Remember, we're in the body of this if, and only if all of these conditions held. So we know it has the right length, we know it has dashes in the correct positions, but it could have dashes in the other positions. So we need to think of, we can check for other dashes. Well, one way to do it is to use built-in string methods. We could say if the string count of our dash is 2, that means we would only have 2 dashes. Then we would want to return true. Else, what? We have an error in format, and we would want to return that false to the user. Okay, now the question becomes, how can we test this? Well, we can just simply remember this function is being defined, it's not being executed, so we could just simply run a quick test. Let's say print is valid format, and let's give it a test string, a couple test strings. Let's do some quick testing. And that's another thing you need to consider. How do you really go about testing the code? Sometimes you need to design some robust testing apparatuses, but here we can just do it simply. Let's just do 01-22/2022, and this should return a true. Let's run it, and we get a true result. So let's run our code on another test string. Let's put a 40 here. Of course, this should still be true. It's not a valid date, but structurally it's correct. Yes, this is true. Now let's put in, so it has 2 dashes. Let's put in something, let's say a 1 with the 3rd dash, still has 10 characters. False, so it's not correct. And if we have a string less than 10 characters, it should also return false. So this is good as well. Now let's look at how would we go about if this was our only function, which it's not. We need to think about how this function would be called in our program. So let's say our string, let's get an input string from the user. Okay. Let's run a diagnostic. Let's test our program. Let's say if is valid. Nice way to do it is just copy and paste. And it's called myString. So we're going to call, this is the function call. If this is true, what do we want to do? Let's print out a simple message to the user. Print. We're not done writing our program. We're just simply testing it. And what's the opposite case? The otherwise is else. Well, otherwise what? They did not enter a valid date string. Okay, let's run it and see what happens. And so it says, please enter a date string for analysis. Okay, so let's test it. Let's test our code of what we have so far. Let's enter a valid string. Let's say January 24th, and we want dashes. 2012, and it should tell us you have entered a valid date string. All right, great. So we now have written the first level of our code. Now, let's run it one more time, January 45th with dashes, 2012, and it should tell us we have entered a valid date string. And it only means, at this point, it only means it's structurally valid in terms of it has the right physical characteristics to it. 2 characters, a dash, followed by 2 characters, followed by 4 characters. So now we need to test whether the string meets the other criteria. I'm Tim Sever. Thank you for joining me for this video installment. Like the video, comment below if you have any questions, and don't forget to subscribe for updates regarding videos on this channel.